Quinn Vale didn't mean to make a scene inside the bustling downtown mall, but when the guy ahead of him started yelling at the woman in the navy trench coat, he stepped forward without thinking twice. "Back off, man." "You bumped into her, not the other way around," Quinn said sharply, placing himself between the towering man and the woman. The man scoffed, clearly not used to being challenged. "She spilled coffee on me." Quinn glanced at the woman. Her face was pale, lips parted in surprise, gripping a now half-empty paper cup. But what struck him wasn't the coffee, it was the look in her eyes. Composed but slightly shaken. She wasn't used to being defended. "Then maybe don't walk like you own the place," Quinn said. "You okay, miss?" She blinked and nodded. "Yes, thank you." The guy muttered something under his breath and stalked off. The woman straightened up, brushing back a strand of dark hair. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." "You didn't," Quinn said simply. "Some people just forget how to act in public." She smiled, soft but confident. "Still, thank you. Most people would have just kept walking." "I'm not most people," he said, then immediately regretted how that sounded. "Sorry, that came out weird. I just meant. I wouldn't let anyone talk to my daughter like that, so I wouldn't let them talk to anyone else like that either." "Your daughter?" she asked, her eyebrows raising slightly. He looked down at the stroller beside him, where 5-year-old Ava sat with a pink lollipop in one hand and a picture book in the other, completely unfazed by the chaos around her. "I'm Quinn," he added. "Quinn Vale, and this is Ava." The woman crouched to Ava's level. "Hi, Ava." "I love your glittery shoes." Ava tilted her head, then nodded. "Daddy says they make me fast." The woman laughed, then rose to her feet again and offered her hand. Vera Sloane, he shook it. Her grip was firm, confident. But there was something unreadable in her gaze that lingered just a second longer than expected. "Well, Vera," he said, "next time some guy acts like a jerk, I'll still be around to stand up for you." She tilted her head. "Then I guess I'll have to make sure there's a next time." He chuckled, then checked the time. "We've got to head out. Ava has ballet in an hour, of course." "Thank you again, Quinn." He gave a small nod and started walking away, not noticing the way she watched him for a long time before turning in the opposite direction. The next day, Quinn was back at the same mall not because he liked shopping, but because the bookstore inside offered free story time and Ava loved it. He was flipping through a discount cookbook when a familiar voice spoke behind him. "Hey, stranger." He turned. Vera stood there in slim jeans, a silk blouse tucked neatly in, carrying a shopping bag that probably cost more than his rent. "Vera," he said, surprised, "didn't expect to see you here. I had a meeting nearby, thought I'd stop in." "You shop here often," he teased, her lips curved. "Sometimes." "I still owe you a coffee," he hesitated. "You don't owe me anything." "I insist," she said. "It's just coffee, unless you think I'm scary," he laughed. "No, you're not scary, just well put together." "I'll take that as a compliment." They walked to the cafe near the fountain, Ava skipping ahead. Vera ordered without checking prices. Quinn noticed. "All right," he said as they sat down. "I've got to ask, what do you do for a living?" She stirred her coffee. "I run a company." "Like, you're a manager?" he asked. She smiled. "Not exactly, I'm the CEO," he blinked. "CEO of what?" "Sloane and Chambers." She sipped her coffee like she hadn't just dropped a bomb. Quinn nearly choked. That's a billion-dollar firm." "Yeah," she said casually. "I grew into it, took over when I was 30, he stared at her. "And yesterday you were just walking around like a normal person." "I am a normal person," he raised an eyebrow. "You have a private driver." "Sometimes, but I like feeling anonymous." Quinn leaned back. "Well, I'm a mechanic. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment and spend most of my time making sure Ava eats her vegetables." Vera looked at him with something new in her eyes, admiration. "That sounds like a full-time CEO job in itself," he chuckled. "You're not weirded out, should I be? I mean, you're a billionaire, and you're a great dad with a kind heart. Not everyone would have stepped up for a stranger like that." He glanced at Ava, then back at her. "I didn't do it for attention. I know, that's why I remembered you." Over the next week, Vera kept showing up. Sometimes near the bookstore, sometimes at the park. Once, she brought Ava a stuffed unicorn, nothing flashy, just thoughtful. Quinn found himself looking forward to her visits, even when he tried to tell himself it was temporary. What could a woman like her want with a guy like him? But then came Thursday. He was fixing an old truck outside the garage when a sleek black car pulled up. Vera stepped out in heels and a perfectly tailored coat, holding 2 bags of takeout. "I figured you hadn't eaten," she said. He wiped his hands and stared at her. "You came all the way down here. You haven't called," she said softly. "I didn't want to bother you." "You're not a bother, Quinn." He took the bag without a word and nodded for her to follow him inside. They sat at the workbench, eating Chinese food out of cartons. "You know," she said, "I've been in boardrooms with men worth billions who couldn't look me in the eye when they disagreed with me. But you stood up for me without even knowing who I was." He looked at her. "I didn't care who you were. I just saw someone being treated unfairly. And that's exactly why I keep coming back." Their eyes met. "I'm not rich," he said. "I can't fly you to Paris or buy you diamonds." "I don't want Paris," she whispered. "I just want you." He didn't know who leaned in first, but the moment her lips met his, everything else disappeared, and neither of them wanted to come up for air. The rain started just before sunset, a slow drizzle that turned the city into a shimmer of wet pavement and glowing headlights. Quinn pulled his jacket tighter around himself as he stepped out of the ballet studio, holding Ava's pink umbrella above her head. She clutched her dance bag, chattering animatedly about her recital practice, her curls bouncing with every step. He nodded and smiled where he could, but his thoughts kept drifting. Vera hadn't texted. Not that he was expecting her to, well, no, he was. After what happened at the garage, after the kiss that had left his hands shaking for hours and his chest aching in the best way, he thought she'd reach out. Instead, silence. The next morning, he found the answer waiting for him on the doorstep, a single white envelope tucked under a small bouquet of tulips. Inside was a note written in careful handwriting. "Dinner, tonight, 8, don't say no." He stared at the card until Ava tugged at his shirt and asked if the flowers were for her. "Not this time, kiddo," he muttered, tucking the note into his back pocket. By evening, he'd found a babysitter through a friend from the garage, someone he trusted, someone who wouldn't let Ava stay up past her bedtime, and changed into a clean button-down he hadn't worn since his cousin's wedding. It was wrinkled at the sleeves and a little snug around the shoulders, but he figured it would do. He didn't expect the car that pulled up to be a vintage black Bentley. The driver didn't speak, just opened the door and waited. Quinn slid in, trying not to look impressed, but the interior smelled like leather and something vaguely citrusy, and the seats were warm. He stared out the window as the city blurred past, his heart thudding with a mixture of anticipation and uncertainty. The restaurant wasn't one he recognized. It sat tucked between 2 high rises with a facade of dark glass and gold trim. Inside, the lighting was low, the decor understated but expensive. No menus, no prices, just a maitre d' who greeted him by name and led him to a private room near the back. Vera was already there. Not in a power suit, not in some designer armor. Tonight, she wore a soft charcoal dress and silver earrings that caught the light every time she moved her head. Her hair was down, wavy and loose, and she looked up at him with something equal parts relief and warmth. "You came. You didn't give me a choice," he said, pulling out the chair opposite hers. "I figured you'd find a way to say yes." He settled into the seat, still scanning the room. "Is this place going to charge me for the oxygen I'm breathing?" Her laugh was quiet but genuine. "I'm not trying to impress you. You could have fooled me." She reached for the wine that had already been poured. "You're the only man I know who looks uncomfortable being treated well." He looked at her directly. "I'm not used to it. Maybe you should be." The server appeared then, placing 2 plates in front of them without asking for orders. Vera didn't flinch. Quinn blinked at the dish, something with roasted duck and a sauce he couldn't name, and tried not to look too clueless. He took a bite. It was incredible. Vera watched him, her expression unreadable. "I wanted to talk to you somewhere quiet." "About what?" "About us." He set his fork down. "There's an us. There could be." He leaned back slightly. "I'm not some project, Vera. I'm not a charity case, and I'm sure as hell not looking for a woman to fix my life." "I never thought any of that," she said calmly, "but I get it. You're used to keeping your world small. Ava, work, routine. And you're used to board meetings and art galas and people who wear watches that cost more than my car." She didn't deny it. "I am, but I'm also the woman who keeps showing up where you are, who brings takeout to a garage, who listens to your daughter talk about unicorns for 20 minutes straight." He stared at her. "Why?" "Because you're the first person in a long time who doesn't want anything from me. You didn't care about my name or my money, you just saw me." He didn't speak. "I know it's fast," she continued, "and I know it's messy, but I'm not asking for forever, I'm asking for a chance." He swallowed hard. "You don't even know what you're getting into. Then tell me." He hesitated, then reached into his wallet and pulled out a worn photo of a woman with a wide smile and tired eyes. "Ava's mom," he said. "She left when Ava was 2, said she wasn't cut out for the kind of life we had. I begged her to stay. She didn't." Vera looked down at the picture, then back at him. "I'm not her, I know," he said quietly, "but I can't afford to get this wrong again. Not just for me, for Ava. I'm not going anywhere unless you ask me to." He stared at her, something cracking open behind his ribs. "You're serious?" "I don't do casual, Quinn. You should know that by now." He nodded slowly. Okay, you want a chance. You've got it." The tension slipped from her shoulders as she smiled, genuine, wide, and unguarded. "Good." They didn't kiss. Not then. But when the waiter brought dessert and Quinn reached across the table to take her hand without thinking, it felt better than any kiss ever could. And for the first time in years, he let himself believe something might actually last. The sharp click of Vera's heels against the marble floor echoed through the penthouse as she paced between the floor-to-ceiling windows and the long mahogany dining table. Beyond the glass, the skyline glittered against the night, but her eyes weren't on the view. They were fixed on the phone resting on the table, silent and unmoving. She'd told herself she wouldn't overthink it. That Quinn agreeing to give them a chance was enough. But now, 4 days later, she hadn't seen him once. Not even a passing glance at the park, the bookstore, or the cafe near the ballet studio. She hadn't realized how much of her day had started revolving around the spaces he occupied until he wasn't in them anymore. "Ma'am," her assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Your 11 o'clock is here. I'm not taking any more meetings today," Vera said, her voice tight. "Reschedule." There was a brief pause before the soft click of the line disconnecting. She closed her eyes, trying to will her thoughts away from Quinn's silence. From the way he'd looked at her across that table, his fingers laced with hers like it meant something. Like he was starting to trust her, but she knew better than anyone trust was delicate and easily shattered. She grabbed her coat. It was late afternoon by the time she reached the garage. The air smelled like oil and burnt rubber, and the clang of metal echoed from deep inside the bay. She stepped carefully around a rusted bumper lying on the floor and spotted Quinn beneath a truck hood, sleeves rolled up and grease streaked along his forearm. He didn't notice her at first. "Quinn." His shoulders tensed at her voice, and he straightened slowly, wiping his hands on a rag before turning to face her. "I wasn't expecting you," he said. "You haven't returned my calls," she replied, her tone even. "I've been busy. With work." He didn't answer right away. "With trying to figure out if I'm completely out of my depth." "You're not. You say that," he said, folding the rag, "but you don't get what it's like to try and juggle a life that's already full and then have someone drop in from another universe." She stepped closer. "I thought we were building something." "Yeah," he said, his jaw tight. "And then I started thinking about school tuition and the rent increase notice I got 2 days ago and how Ava asked if you'd come to her recital next month." Her expression softened. "I'd love to. That's not the point," he said, voice rising. "The point is she's 5. She's already starting to picture you as part of her world, and I don't know if I can let that happen. Because of me. Because if you leave, it won't just break me, it'll break her. And I'm not sure I can survive watching that happen again." Vera's throat tightened. "Do you honestly think I'd walk away from her?" "I don't know," he admitted. "I don't know what this looks like once the newness wears off." She looked around the garage at the cracked concrete, the busted vending machine in the corner, the sound of laughter from one of the younger mechanics just beyond the partition. "You still think I see this place and think less than, but I never have." He didn't speak. "Come with me," she said suddenly. "What? Tonight? There's a charity gala, I have a table, black tie, open bar, overpriced art auction, everything you probably hate." "But come anyway," he crossed his arms. "What's the point?" I want you to see what my world really looks like, not the headlines, not the office, me, the part I don't show anyone." He hesitated. "And if I say no, I'll still be here tomorrow," she said. "But if you say yes, maybe you'll understand why I keep showing up at your garage instead of hiding behind a boardroom table." That night, the tux Vera had sent over hung awkwardly on Quinn's broad frame. The valet barely concealed his surprise when Quinn stepped out of the cab in front of the glass-walled event center. Inside, the room was lit with soft gold chandeliers and lined with ice sculptures and waiters balancing champagne flutes on silver trays. Every guest looked like they belonged in a fashion magazine. And then there was Quinn, brows furrowed, uncomfortable in the stiff collar, feeling like he'd wandered into a dream where he didn't speak the language. Vera spotted him instantly. "You made it," she said, approaching with effortless grace. "I'm pretty sure I've been mistaken for security twice," he muttered. She reached up to fix his crooked bow tie. "You look amazing," he glanced around. "No one here thinks so." "I don't care what they think." "I care what you think." "Then maybe you shouldn't have invited me to a place where everyone's name tag costs more than my truck." She didn't laugh. Instead, she took his hand and led him through the crowd, ignoring every stare. They stopped in front of a large canvas on an easel, abstract and chaotic, painted in bold reds and blacks. "My father painted this," she said quietly. He blinked. "I didn't know he was an artist." He wasn't. He was a construction foreman, came home one day and decided to try painting. Said he wanted to make something that wouldn't crumble over time. Quinn studied the brushstrokes. "It's intense." He died 2 months after he finished it. He looked at her. "I'm sorry," she nodded. "It's the only piece I won't sell. Every year I bring it here, and every year people offer money for it. But it's not about the money. It's about remembering where I came from." Quinn's expression shifted. "You grew up with this, in a one-bedroom apartment over a laundromat," she said. "My parents worked double shifts. My mother cleaned houses. My father laid bricks. They didn't get to see what I became, but I never forgot what they gave me." He looked back at the painting, then at her. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you think I live in a world too far from yours, but I was raised in yours, Quinn. I just built something different on top of it." He didn't speak, but something in his eyes changed. Later, when they danced slow, awkward at first but gradually more natural, he leaned in close. "You're not what I expected," he said. "Neither are you." He tightened his hold on her waist. "I keep thinking there's a catch. There isn't. You're not going to vanish. Not unless you ask me to." He shook his head. "I'm not that stupid." She smiled, resting her forehead against his. "Then let's stop pretending we don't want this." The music swelled, and she let herself fall into him completely, knowing for the first time in years that someone was finally strong enough to catch her. The recital hall was buzzing with the sound of shuffling programs and excited parents adjusting phone cameras. Rows of cushioned seats filled quickly beneath the warm stage lights, and Quinn sat in the middle of the third row, his tie slightly askew. Ava's carefully combed curls bouncing as she leaned over his lap to peer at the stage curtain. "Do you think they'll let me keep the tiara after?" she whispered. He brushed a stray hair from her forehead. "If they don't, I'll ask nicely. You could use your serious voice, the one that makes people listen," he chuckled. "I'll save that for emergencies." A tap on his shoulder made him turn. Vera stood there in a soft blue dress, her coat folded over one arm, her eyes bright with something he hadn't seen in a long time, pure ease. No tension in her shoulders, no guarded hesitation. "Is this seat taken?" she asked, tilting her head toward the empty chair beside him. "Not anymore," he answered, standing to let her through. Ava lit up. "You came." "Of course I did," Vera said, crouching slightly. "I wouldn't miss your big night." "She's second from last," Quinn added. They saved the best for the end. Vera smiled and settled into the seat. "I'll wait all night if I have to." As the lights dimmed and the music began, Quinn found himself watching Vera more than the performance. Her hand brushed his once, then didn't move away. She leaned in during one particularly chaotic dance number and whispered something that made him laugh under his breath. And for a moment, everything felt remarkably settled. When Ava finally took the stage, her small frame poised in a pink leotard and glittering plastic tiara, Quinn didn't even try to hide the emotion tightening his throat. She performed each move with fierce concentration, her arms stretched just right, her spins wobbly but determined. And when she finished, she didn't look at the audience, she looked straight at Vera. After the applause, they met her backstage with a bouquet wrapped in crinkled paper. Ava clutched it like treasure. "You were incredible," Vera said, kneeling down to eye level. "I didn't fall once," Ava announced proudly. "You were my favorite dancer." Quinn ran a hand down Ava's back. "Let's get you changed, kiddo, then we'll grab dinner." Ava's eyes lit up. "Can we go to the place with the chocolate pancakes?" he laughed. "You just danced your heart out." "I think we can make that happen." Vera glanced toward the exit. "I'll wait with you." Inside the small booth at the diner, Ava curled up next to Quinn, half asleep by the time the pancakes arrived. He cut her pieces slowly, helping her eat between yawns. Vera watched them, her expression unreadable. "You're good at this," she said softly. "I've had a few years of practice." "No, I mean, you're steady. There's a lot of noise in the world, but you never let it in." He glanced down at Ava, then back up. "I didn't have a choice. She needed me to be solid. You still chose to be." He let the words hang in the air before asking, "Why are you really doing this? Not just the recitals and the dinners. Everything." She looked at him like he was missing something obvious. "Because I want a life that feels real. And I haven't had that in a long time. You could have anything, anyone." "I don't want anyone else," she said quietly. "I want the man who fixed my car's alternator at midnight because I had to drive to a funeral the next morning. I want the father who knows every detail of his kid's bedtime routine and doesn't cut corners. I want a life that's not polished for cameras or structured for headlines." He swallowed, his voice low. "That life comes with responsibility. It's not always easy. I'm not afraid of hard things." They sat in silence for a moment, the hiss of the kitchen grill and soft clatter of dishes filling the space. Then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "I've been holding on to this." Quinn raised an eyebrow but took it. Inside was a check, not for money he owed, he knew that instantly. It was a deposit slip for a trust in Ava's name. He stiffened. "What is this? It's not charity." "I didn't ask you to, you didn't. But I want to make sure that no matter what happens, she's protected. You said she's your whole world. Well, she's part of mine now, too." He stared at the paper. "I don't know how to accept something like this." "Then don't think of it as accepting. Think of it as me investing in the people I love." He looked up sharply. "You love her. I love both of you." The words hit him like a slow-moving train, not crashing, but undeniable, weighty. True, he folded the check back into its envelope and handed it back. "You keep that," he said. "Not because I don't believe you, but because if this is going to work, I need to know we're choosing each other not because of what we can give, but what we already are." She didn't argue. She just reached across the table and took his hand. Later that night, after Ava was asleep in her room and the apartment was quiet, Vera stood in the kitchen in one of his old sweatshirts, barefoot, a mug of tea in her hands. "You know," she said, "I don't think I've ever felt more like myself than I do right now." He leaned against the counter beside her. "In the world's most underwhelming kitchen, in the place where I finally stopped pretending." He reached for her mug, took a sip, and made a face. "This is terrible." She laughed, really laughed, and set it down. Then she looked at him with a seriousness that made the air shift. "I want this," she said. "I want you, I want Ava. I want mornings with cereal stuck to the floor and Saturdays at ballet and dinners that don't come with wine pairings." He stepped closer, close enough to feel her breath against his collarbone. "You sure? I've never been more certain of anything." His hand found her waist, grounding her as much as anchoring himself. "Then marry me," her breath caught. "No ring, no grand gesture, just you and me, marry me." She didn't blink, didn't hesitate. "Yes." He nodded once, then pulled her into him as if letting go wasn't an option, and it wasn't, because this wasn't a fairy tale, it was better, it was real. The courthouse steps were slick from the early morning drizzle. Though the sky had cleared into a pale spring blue by the time Vera stepped out, her heels clicking softly against the stone. She paused at the top, eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on Quinn. He stood just beyond the columns, holding a small bouquet of daisies, his tie slightly loosened and a warm grin tugging at his mouth. Ava stood beside him in a white dress with a pink ribbon sash, Her hair twisted into a lopsided braid and a proud expression on her face like she was part of something important. "You're late," he called up. "I had to sign 3 different forms just to change my last name," she replied as she descended. "You could have kept it." "I didn't want to," she said, reaching him. "I want everything that comes with being yours, even the paperwork." Ava tugged at Vera's hand. "Can we go now?" "You promised pancakes." "There will be pancakes," Quinn said, lifting Ava into one arm and holding Vera's fingers in the other. "But first, we're stopping by the garage." Vera raised a brow. "On our wedding day, I have something for you there." The short drive was quiet, filled with the soft hum of the radio and Ava's sleepy humming. Vera leaned against the seat, watching Quinn's profile as he drove focused, calm, steady. She hadn't worn a gown or walked down an aisle, and yet she felt more grounded than she ever had in any ballroom or gala. Her marriage wasn't built on grandeur. It was built on 1,000 small truths. At the garage, the bay door was already open, revealing a space Quinn had clearly cleared with intention. A long table stretched down the center, draped in linen, lined with simple lanterns and vases of wildflowers. A few of the guys from the shop were gathered near the back, dressed better than usual but still unmistakably themselves. Vera stepped out slowly. "What is this?" "Our reception," Quinn said. "It's not the Ritz, but the food's hot and the beer's cold." She turned toward him. "You did this for me, for us," he corrected. "You didn't get your gala." "I figured this was the next best thing." "Actually," she said, sliding her arm around his waist, "it's better." They shared a meal surrounded by laughter and the smell of barbecue, Ava darting between tables with a juice box in hand and frosting on her nose. Vera sat tucked under Quinn's arm, her heels kicked off, her voice low as she asked, "Are you happy?" "I didn't think I'd get this kind of ending," he admitted. "But yeah, I'm happy." Later, when the sun dipped low and the shop lights cast soft glows across the walls, Vera pulled Quinn aside. "I'm selling the penthouse," his brows lifted. "What?" "I'm buying the building across from the bookstore, the old one with the rooftop garden. It's got 3 floors. I want to convert the top into something livable for us." He blinked. "That place is a wreck. It has potential." "Like you said about that busted '67 Mustang last month," he chuckled. "You sure you want to live across from a bookstore and down the street from a ballet studio? I want to be where our life happens. Not where it only looks good on paper." He kissed her then, long and deep, his hand pressed to the back of her neck, anchoring her like the sky might pull her away if he didn't. When they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me. Then it's mutual." The weeks passed in a rhythm that felt like music, steady, evolving, unexpected. Quinn moved into the new building with her as crews began renovation. He kept the garage, still fixing engines and teaching Ava how to tell a socket wrench from a ratchet. Vera stepped back from the day-to-day at Sloane and Chambers, promoting a new COO and taking on a more selective portfolio. They made mornings a ritual. Toast crumbs on the counter, mismatched mugs. Ava sitting cross-legged on the kitchen stool quizzing Quinn on dinosaur facts, while Vera read headlines aloud and corrected typos with a red pen. They made space for the chaos and the quiet. One weekend, Vera took them to a cabin in the Catskills. No cell service, no meetings, just 3 days of hiking, board games, and Ava learning how to skip stones in the lake. On the last night, as they lay tangled under a blanket by the fire, Quinn brushed his fingers down her arm. "You scared me," he said. She turned her head. When you told me you loved me, I didn't know what to do with it. Wasn't sure I could give it back the way you deserved." "You did," she whispered. "Still," he said, pulling her closer, "I want to say it more. I want to say it enough that you never have to wonder." "You already do," she said, resting her head on his chest. "Every single day." A year later, the rooftop was finished. They christened it with a small gathering, just family, close friends, and Ava spinning in circles on the new tile floor. String lights crisscrossed the beams, and the scent of lemon cake filled the air. Vera stood at the edge of the rooftop garden, looking out at the bookstore across the street, and the faint glow of the ballet studio's pink neon sign. Quinn stepped beside her, wrapping an arm around her waist. "We did it," he said. She leaned into him. We're still doing it. He looked down at her hand, where a simple gold band sat beside her engagement ring. When we're old and wrinkled, do you think you'll still want to live above a bookstore? I'll want to live wherever you are. Ava's laughter echoed behind them, and they turned to see her chasing a balloon, her cheeks flushed with joy. And her? He asked. She's going to change the world. They stood in the warm evening breeze, shoulder to shoulder, watching their daughter twirl and laugh and glow, and in that moment nothing was missing. Nothing uncertain. The life they'd built messy, real, extraordinary was whole, and it was theirs, forever.